our FY26 budget deliberations. Today's date is June 25, 2025. The time is 10:02 a.m. In attendance are Commissioners Eberline, Duncan, and Matari. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? We do have actually a couple of items we need to add. They weren't posted correctly downstairs, so we need to add item 2 and 3 onto this meeting.
They're not emergency, but I think we're safe if we end up cutting, items because everybody's here anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I don't think we need to make a motion or anything.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, public comment. Hearing nothing, we'll go into our first item. FY26 budget brief, including B budget, operating expenses, and who would like to start? Clerk Locke or?
I will be starting.
Okay, Brandy Falcon.
All right, Brandy Falcon for the record. We have a lot of kind of small items to touch on today, so I'll try my best to stay organized. We're going to start off with the City of Hayden law enforcement contract. At the budget meeting last week, I told the board that I would come prepared today with updated numbers to present, and so the first document that I have is a comparison just of the hard personnel costs. I'm not including any overhead costs. And I also, I was unable to find the FY22 COLA for the City of Hayden, but I did enter the COLAs that they gave their employees for what years I could find, FY23, 24, and 25. So in FY23, City of Hayden gave a 5% COLA, Kootenai County gave a 6% COLA. In FY24, City of Hayden gave a 5% COLA, Kootenai County gave a 4.5% COLA, and in FY25, City of Hayden gave a 3% COLA, Kootenai County gave a 2.5% COLA. I have been unable to find right now the proposed COLA percentage for FY26 from the City of Hayden, but I believe that it's going to be a COLA and a market adjustment. I'm still working on getting the actual number, and so far Kootenai County has proposed a 0% COLA for next year. And then going down, these are the positions that have historically been assigned to that contract. This top position, the school resource officer, is not in the Hayden contract for FY26. That contract is going to be negotiated directly with the school. The positions in red were funded at 50% in those respective years. So if we go down here, you can see I'm going to focus on FY26, and each of these deputies is at the top of their matrix. So they will not be getting an additional increase so far next year. This one is an open position, so it doesn't include an amount for a step. This position I did include in FY26, the cost of the step for that deputy. The rest of them, there are no steps. So total personnel costs right now for FY26 for the Hayden personnel, and that includes the new lieutenant position, as well as the average cost of a full-time detective, which I was told by the Sheriff's Office to include that, is $1,294,923. In addition, we are budgeting to purchase a new vehicle for the new lieutenant, so that brings total expenses for the contract to $1,389,679. The new revenue numbers I got last week from the Sheriff's Office show currently proposed revenue for the contract is $1,144,000, which means we are at a deficit of $245,679 for that contract. In order to fund the deficit of that contract, Kootenai County will have to take a 0.4% tax increase to make up the difference. And that is just personnel and vehicle costs and does not include any overhead on top of that. The next analysis that I did does include some overhead calculations if we were going to attempt to charge the City of Hayden for other law enforcement services that Kootenai County is providing that usually would be provided by a city law enforcement function. And so I have the same personnel costs and vehicle costs, but then I added the cost of the Hayden overtime, and that is actual numbers because we do track the expenses of the Hayden overtime separately. I added the depreciation for vehicles. I added a prorated amount, the expense for administrative overhead. I divided that across the entire Sheriff's Office. Same for the cost of patrols, operational expenses, as well as the expense of command staff over patrol. Same with detectives, and then records, again, divided that across the entire Sheriff's Department, the expenses of civil, and then we have total overhead of $98,000 per deputy. So if we were going to go off of my calculations, the contract really should be 2.3 million to include the cost of overhead expenses, which would leave the contract at a $1.2 million deficit. And if that were the case, if we're taking overhead into consideration, Kootenai County would have to take a 2% tax increase to fund the deficit once you include the overhead expenses that we do incur on that contract. However, to be fair, I don't have the anecdotal data of service levels. Perhaps the city of Hayden doesn't require the level of service that other areas do. So you have the ability to fluctuate the overhead percentage. So as I have calculated it, the markup for overhead would be 71%. You could reduce it all the way down to 40% if you wanted to, anecdotally, knowing that service levels vary across different cities and different parts of the county. And if you reduce it to 40%, that would bring the contract to 1.9 million. So that's just a brief overview of where we are at with that contract. If there are no questions, I'll go ahead and move on.
Any questions? I have some. So did I hear you correctly that the school resource officer was pulled off the contract and that it will be negotiated directly with the sheriff's office and the school?
Yes, that's what I've been told.
Okay, so we're going to take a cost out of a contract and now we're just going to shift it out of the contract, but the net loss will still be the same, maybe even more for the county. Is that correct?
Potentially.
Potentially,
I don't
depending
know.
on what the negotiations
I
come
don't
in
know
at.
what the negotiations are right now.
Okay. The vehicles that Hayden is purchasing, how many have they purchased, do you know, over the last, in this chart here?
I've attempted to put that information in here. I'm still waiting on some information from the sheriff's office. Based on my review of the signed contracts that I can find in OnBase, based on the contracts, zero vehicles in FY22, 3 vehicles in FY23, 0 in FY24, and 2 in FY25, and proposed 1 in FY26. And that's just based on what I'm seeing in the contracts. I haven't received confirmation yet from the sheriff's office. They're working on it.
Now, it sounds like they purchased 5 vehicles, but we have 9 deputies on the FY25 contract.
Yes, so 5 vehicles if you add FY23 and 25, yes.
Okay. Are we taking into account the amortization cost of those vehicles?
In the current contract, no, I don't believe so.
So that's an additional loss that the county's really taking.
I would consider that an overhead expense.
Yeah, okay. And the increase in revenues from Hayden went from $1,143,884 in FY25 to an estimated for FY26, $1,144,000. Is that correct?
Yes, and those are the figures based on me reading the contracts that I see in OnBase.
Yeah, and that's about a $116 increase, right?
Yeah, which is less than 1%. So I
And-
also added the increase in personnel costs up here.
Yeah.
So from FY22 to FY23, personnel and costs increased 49%. From FY23 to 24, they increased 81%. And you can contrast that down below with the revenue increase percentage, which was only 53%. And then the next year, 6%. And this year, it's less than 1%
Yeah,
increase.
and the cost estimate for staffing goes from $1,088,000 for FY25 and $1,294,000 for FY26, which is a $200,000 increase, correct?
Yep, it looks like it.
Okay, but we're getting $116 extra on revenue, and we're being told we're moving in the right direction. Is that correct?
I was at the same meeting you were, and it seemed like that's
Yeah.
what they were saying.
Okay.
And I did want to make one last point on the Hayden contract. So I know there's kind of been some concern that if worst case scenario, we were to lose all of the revenue from this contract, we would be another $1 million deficit in the FY26 budget. That actually doesn't concern me because if we were to lose the revenue from the Hayden contract, all we have to do is cut the new lieutenant for Hayden and the deputies that are backfilling the SRO positions. And those requests, along with their onboarding costs, is over $1 million. And the Hayden deputies, in theory, could then backfill the SRO position. So I'm not really concerned about a budget impact just from that. I know that that's been brought up a couple times, so.
Yeah, well, what it would do is it would, I presume, allocate deputies to the rest of the county.
I don't.
Or
I would
something along
presume,
those
but I'm not
lines.
an expert in operations, so.
Yeah. So this is that contract where we just, when you really get down to the cost numbers, we just keep losing and losing and losing because we're not even accounting for the proper cost numbers. Are we tracking our costs at the sheriff's office for this contract?
Currently, no. The operational expenses such as training and ammo and uniforms and fuel is commingled with the regular patrol budget. However, the sheriff's office is willing to start tracking the Hayden operational expenses
Yeah.
separately, at least based on the staff that I've talked to. And so we may start doing that going forward.
So we can't even allocate our overhead costs. It's all guesstimate, really.
It's all purely my estimates based on number of FTEs.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, if there's no
All
other.
right. Well, that's good news.
Okay. I'm now going to go into the preliminary summary, which I believe is next in your packet. I'm going to try and go in order of the things that I have in your packet. So next is preliminary summary. Currently at a 0% tax increase, we are $2 million deficit. If we go to a 3% tax increase, we are at a $216,000 deficit. And as a reminder, there is no COLA currently in the budget right now. Next, I'm going to go to the requests per elected official. I added a new column, total proposed A and B increases over FY25 adopted budget. Because the deficit we're facing, we really need to focus on making cuts to A and B budget. It's the ongoing costs that are too high right now. And so I just wanted to go over every elected official individually. The assessor is increasing ongoing expenses by $146,000. The BOCC is increasing ongoing expenses by $645,000. The clerk is increasing ongoing expenses by $122,000. The coroner is increasing $18,000. District court is increasing $99,000. Prosecutor is going down $37,000. The sheriff is increasing $2.8 million, and the treasurer is going down $94,000. So that is purely the requests from the elected officials for their A and B requests. That does not include any COLA, any steps, any health insurance increases, because those are outside the control of the individual electeds. If there are no questions, I'm going to move on.
Any questions? No questions?
Okay, let me see real quick what's next in your packets. So let's go to, I have it flagged with a little orange sticky note, the B budget, where we're going to start. So if you'll flip there, we're going to go to the new program summary. And I have many things open. Okay, this should be very quick. We're not going to go through the onboarding costs because those are associated with the FTE requests. So we are going to go to line 6. There is an $8,200 request from the sheriff's office for a program called LeoWeb. And this is a program that helps assist deputies in removing their private information from the internet. And then there is a request from the sheriff's office, $4,100 for a program called the Briefing Room. And it is a web-based program, I believe, with like training topics and videos that can be used. And those are the 2 items we need board direction on approving or cutting at this time.
Which line items are these? Is that on this sheet here?
It's on this, yeah, it's on that
All
sheet,
right.
and so it's in little tiny.
Oh,
Number 6. Are there any questions, board thoughts on approval or cutting of these requests?
well, do you have any comments, Commissioner Duncan?
Just Leo Webb, I thought maybe the association could pick that up, because that seems like an appropriate association expense, but that's just my thoughts on it. So I did not approve it last year, and I'm really not inclined to this year either.
Commissioner Eberline? Well, I've never been a fan of getting involved in telling people what tools they need for their job. Our job is to figure out how much money there is and then, appropriate it accordingly to need. So, I think one of the things that wasn't really touched on, and I'll touch on it a little bit just with some additional numbers, is the fact that with a 3% increase, and did this include adjustments on how we're looking at interest income?
I have not made any adjustments, so currently we are using 2 million of interest for capital and 3.5 for ongoing costs.
For ongoing. And so if that drops by 1.5, we have problems. I mean,
We currently have problems, but then we have even bigger
but
problems.
in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
So with a 3% tax increase, we're at 217,000, basically, in the red, we would have to
no
cut.
COLA.
Yeah, with no COLA. If people want a 2.5% increase, that's $1.8 million.
Yes. So
So that puts us at $2 million in the red with a 3% to give staff a 2.5% COLA. A 1%, 742,000, which would put us at $1 million in the red. I would prefer that the elected officials put their asks in priority of need.
Okay.
If the elected officials want to have a COLA, make that number one, but something gets cut off. But I just think it's a fool's errand for us to get involved in saying to people, here are the tool sets you're going to get to do your job, and not let the people who are actually doing the work decide what tool sets they need, given the limited amount of resources. But I don't know if anyone up here, feels the same on that? I do. Okay. Commissioner Duncan.
It's just not been my experience that at the first ask that is done by the elected officials. So, no,
Well,
if that works, great.
They can have their ask. It's just a matter of where the dollars cut off at, and that's where the ask ends. And then it's just a matter of how do we prioritize among the different elected officials. And I've said this before, the better the argument that you can illustrate for your needs, the easier it is, I think, for the board to triage those requests among the different electeds. There's no other way. Otherwise, it just becomes, and I got to bring the picture in here of the mother bird in the nest with all the chicklets, because it is the best picture to articulate what it's like to be a county commissioner at this point in time. So maybe next budget meeting. Anyhow, Under Sheriff Nelson, do you want to speak?
Commissioner, if I may, as directed by both you and Commissioner Duncan, my staff has in fact, if you will, prioritized our requests. I would say that if there was a discussion to have, that we would meet with the commissioners to ensure a COLA for our personnel at the sheriff's office. We're willing to cut as much as we can. As we discussed previously, if it came down to retaining our personnel we currently have to stay competitive with the wages, we'll gladly go with that to maintain a competitive wage with the personnel we currently have, if you will, do more with less and gain what other small amounts of equipment we can to maintain the competitiveness, to maintain our staffing, which has taken so long to triage over the vast amount of years to become almost at a current full staffing.
Well, I appreciate that, because anyone who's been in the military, it's mission first, people second, and you last. They usually show that with fingers too.
Yes, sir.
So you just prioritize. You just prioritize the, what you want. If you want to take care of the people first, then your other asks won't be there. Now, the only challenge, I think, is the fact that we've had some issues with the jail medical that came in way beyond budget. And so we can't be in a situation where we're finagling the numbers and then something happens mid-year and then we go, well, how come that happened? How come we didn't properly account for the budgeting? Our job is to budget correctly, at least, to be partially correct. We know we'll be precisely wrong, but to get close enough that we don't have to dig into fund balance.
Understood, and if we're all in agreement, this was 11th hour decision for this budgetary cost for the medical contract. It was the only contract we had available to us in the midst of it. So
Understood.
I'd say on behalf of both the BOCC and the Sheriff's Office, we made the best of what we had at the time. But going forward, you're right. The budgeting, knowing the numbers we have with the company provided and the services, and the, if you will, the costs that we cannot control, prescription, longevity of people in the jail that have extreme medical needs, that's a variable we can't control, but we can better project it with the given facts now.
Well, I think also that the clerk or budget director will, or finance director will start talking about how some of the previous year's asks and fulfillment is actually, it's increased the overhead along with the steps. If we're going to do steps for largely the county, we're bound, and that takes a certain amount of the money that comes in. But I'll let it go back to the finance director unless you have anything else you want to add.
No, thank you.
All right.
So real quick, I did want to remind everyone that our health insurance is going up for general government, $967,000, almost $1 million. And, it is, since I've been here, we are seeing health plan increases every year. PMR is helping to offset a little bit, but it's still early in that program. And so, we're having to absorb the, regular health insurance increase, almost $1 million, plus I think a $1.3 million increase for the jail medical, because we're not only increasing for the next year's contract, but the amount we were short this year. And so we're just having a lot of large operational increases this year. I also wanted to touch on the mid-year increases in FY24. So I've been trying to reach out to elected officials to see if anyone is willing to cut, where they're able. And I've been met with quite a bit of resistance. Many don't feel they need to make any cuts. And so I did want to remind everyone that there are budget increases that occur throughout the year that the elected official gets approved for, and those are not being approved in the course of the budget cycle. So they're not being seen in context with everyone else's requests in the budget cycle. So I went back to FY24 and I added up all of the mid-year personnel requests that every elected official got approved. And so these would be requests that were approved in FY24, and the dollar amount here is the estimate of how much they increased the FY25 budget, which is the budget we're currently in right now. So I'm just going to go down the list. The sheriff, mid-year asks of $1.2 million, BOCC $634,000, prosecutor $325,000, district court $104,000, clerk $20,000, treasurer $8,500, assessor $8,300. So I just want you guys to remember that when you approve mid-year requests, we're increasing the baseline for next year's budget. And so I just, I want the electeds and their departments to remember that they are driving the budget deficit, even if, it's coming from mid-year requests. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think that's why it's so important that we avoid these mid-year requests, because whoever is granted them gets their share of the pie for the following year at the expense typically of the others.
All right, so unless
Now,
there's... Oh, go
just
ahead.
real quick, on the BOCC one, what was the ask on that?
I believe the majority of it was public defender, but I would have to go back and look at the detail.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, and they're no longer a part of the county at this
Correct.
point, so.
they're no longer here. So unless there's specific board direction to cut these or approve the request from the sheriff, I'm just gonna mark them as on hold for now, if you wanted them to prioritize. Or was there board direction from two commissioners to cut or approve these?
You have the list of what they want, or?
No, I'm sorry, I'm back on the new program summary, Leo Webb
Oh,
and the
gotcha.
briefing room. I have no list of priorities, I haven't been given anything.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, I don't know. Did you want to give direction to the EOs to go back with their pencil sharpened and
I think they just have to
the auditor?
prioritize what they want. And, as a board, we have to decide, what do we want to do with the bottom line numbers? I think looking at the asks and then deciding, I mean, the board started off with, give us numbers with a 0% tax increase. I don't know how we could even entertain a COLA that much.
Not with the $1 million in jail and the $1 million in medical.
So it really just comes down to the capacity of what is out there and what we can do. As far as like the interest, I am all for making capital purchases with the interest. So whatever the capital asks are,
But-
we can use that.
Right, but the 1.5, adding that back in, now it's going to increase our deficit, which, I mean, that's fine. It's a more conservative approach. I was going a little bit less conservative when
Yeah.
I suggested that. So
Well,
treasurer might have something to say, but
I agree. And, the question is too, what does next year hold? Because we do have just a natural growth a little bit too with new construction and stuff like that. It'll be less probably for next year than it will from previous years because we're not growing as fast. But there are some additional revenues that we can probably naturally count on. I don't think they're going to go down. So we just have to be very careful on any kind of ongoing expense that's being used for interest, which can disappear in future years.
So currently, the board is using 3.5 of interest for ongoing costs
3.5 million.
out of 5.5.
out of 5.5. Are you
Yeah.
comfortable keeping that, or did you want to have a discussion of changing that?
Well, I think that's something that we probably should have a discussion with the treasurer with.
Yeah. He's here.
Before we finalize it. Treasurer Matheson, did you want to share your thoughts on that? Sorry to kind of pick on you there when you're in the audience.
Do you have specific questions, or do you want me just to blabber on about what I'm thinking?
I would just like to hear your thoughts because, again, I suggested that we go to 3.5 ongoing, just looking at the past history and how much we're returning to fund balance each year. So I wanted to really give relief to some taxpayers to try to use the interest more than
Right.
not.
And I think that's a commendable objective. Obviously, it's a board decision on how much you want to rely on ongoing interest revenue to fund ongoing operations. As you both, all of you know, I'm a very conservative individual, so I think it's aggressive to annuitize an ongoing revenue stream in the form of interest and use that to fund ongoing operations. Just because in my career, not only here at the county, but private industry, interest rates can tank. So I think 3.5 million is a little bit on the aggressive side. Not to say that you couldn't fund it that way, but if I were to put kind of confidence intervals on expectations of what I think interest would be going forward, I would want to be in the 80, 85, 90% confident that I could generate that kind of interest revenue stream for the foreseeable future. And I would not be comfortable recommending 3.5. I'd probably be closer to 2. But again, this is a decision of the board. You have a lot of things pushing and pulling here. If you do what you were suggesting, relief for the taxpayers, increasing revenue in the form of interest is an option. The way that I would think about this, if I sat on the board, I would want interest revenue, or the majority of it, to flow through some kind of a fund, whether it's a contingency fund or it's a capital fund, so that you grow the actual balances in a fund and then spend them as you grow that balance, instead of, like I said earlier, annuitizing a forecasted interest and spending that, because that's how you can get in trouble very quickly. So those are my thoughts.
So 2 million would be 1.5 less, which at 3% would put us at about $1.7 million deficit if we
Without
err
a COLA.
on the conservative side.
And again, this is a board decision, because you guys are managing all the asks, and you're also managing the expectations of property taxpayers. And good luck.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any questions?
Board, there is still some operating costs and capital. I think we could,
Thank you,
Check.
Steve.
yeah, we look at that is in that ongoing. So we'll cover that today too, that maybe we reduce that number we just mentioned.
Yes, I haven't got to it yet. So, okay, I'm gonna mark the new program as a hold for now. we'll wait to hear back from the sheriff on prioritizing.
Under Sheriff Nelson?
Just for my clarification, maybe the edification of all present, are we to bring forward our itemized list to you and include Brandy in that, or how would you like that?
Thoughts?
Just deal with Brandy. If you're taking anything off the table, just go through the auditor's office.
Well, I think itemized list is different than taking it off. I think, are we prioritizing it? That's what we are requested?
Yeah, give her a prioritized list.
Okay.
And she can distribute to the board.
Thank you.
All right,
Well, I think we have Assessor Kovacs. Did you want to add something here?
Commissioners, yes, I have a similar question to what Under Sheriff question was. And last week, we were asked by the board to come back and present some more information to this board.
well, we're gonna get to that, that's personnel.
Okay, all right,
Yeah, let's get to that first.
thank you.
Yeah, I have quite a bit to get through, so, okay, next.
Did you, I'm sorry, Brandy, Captain Deke, are you,
I did. I've got a question for the board. With the lack of COLA that's being proposed, not taking the full 3%, I just want to know the board, I in charge of our background and recruiting and a lot of those sections, and we've seen relief in the last few years with what the board action has been. I'd like to know the board's plan for recruitment and retention with the plan that's being proposed, because I think it's going to create a disaster for our retention and our recruitment
With a
if we don't keep step.
Right, so with a 3% tax raise, we are still 3.5 million above what we can afford. That's with a 3% tax raise.
So at this stage, we are simply trying to cut expenses. I mean, I don't know if the board would like to do a COLA. I think everyone agrees it would be nice to be able to do, but like you said, at a 3% tax raise, even if we go, we're gonna have to reduce our interest likely. We can't afford the COLA right now. We have too many asks.
you know, there's one other thing too. You know, I've said this before, that, you know, when it comes to operational efficiency, you have to understand your organization's metrics. And, you know, Craig, if it's okay, you know, I'd used your name before. We started this last year, and you're actually cutting people in the office, and you're developing a more efficient operation. And I encourage, if anyone has questions about how that works a little bit, if it's not part of your specialty, talk with Craig a little bit. I mean, this is how we save money, you know, is developing this operational efficiency. And once we understand, you know, what our productivity numbers are, you know, in some way, some measurement way, then we can start to understand, one, where the real needs are and what is acceptable in this community. It's easier to articulate that. It's easier to solve those problems when you understand what is happening within your organization. Right now, it's hard because we're being told that there's problems. We're being told that stuff has to get done. But without the numbers, it's hard for that to have impact, to have, you know, the weight behind it, if you will. So I'd encourage you to talk to Craig if it's something you're not sure about. Go ahead, Brandy, I'm sorry.
All right, so I'm going to move on to community services, which you do have printed out. It's this document. This is what the board currently has budgeted as money that they pass on to other organizations or agencies in North Idaho. So I've highlighted in red the ones that have increased over last year. So we have the animal, just going down the list of all of them, Animal Damage Control Board, Board of Community Guardian, which is one of the increases, North Idaho Crisis Center, Safe Passage, Women's Center, the Soil and Water District, University of Idaho Extension, all the senior centers, Museum of North Idaho, and then new $32,000 request from the Rathdrum Westwood Historical Society to put a new roof on the jail in Rathdrum. So does the board have any, this is in the board's budget, so I do need direction from the board what you would like to do in regards to these requests.
Thoughts?
What are your thoughts?
What can we afford?
Look, we've got to take care of our people first. So after that, then we prioritize this stuff. If we don't take care of our people first, we can't take care of anyone else.
The one thing I'm fine with removing is the 32,000 for the Historical Society.
All right, is it generally agreed by the other commissioners to cut the request from the Rathdrum Historical Society?
It's okay with me.
All right, that's gonna be a cut. And then, are there any other items in this list the board wants to cut? Or are you comfortable leaving as is?
Well, I think we just have to, I don't know, I mean, Board of Community Guardian, where's your heads on that?
Well, the issue is it's pretty much a necessary service and we're going to have to pay for it anyway.
I understand.
So I rather budget to what they need than,
I
them coming
understand.
later. Yeah.
What I'm trying to do is figure out, okay, what are these, where's the most important one and where's the least important one?
well, any
know.
of these cuts is really not going to move the needle. So there's return on investment on all of them. And I think we'll do more damage by cutting these small amounts. So,
I think the University of Idaho, that's just their lease. So I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that just their lease amount?
no,
or
no, that, we have not given them any additional funds for probably 3 or 4 years. And that was just to get them caught up to their salaries and stuff.
Yes, and then they had to move.
Yeah.
Their lease ended, and so that, I think that difference is really to cover their lease expense.
Well, I thought it was what they were, it's going to ongoing. It's not just their lease. So, yeah.
I don't think they've asked for increase, right, for the last,
Right.
couple years, too?
Yep.
All right, if there's no further board direction to make any cuts here, I'm gonna move on. At one time, I did receive questions from the commissioners on what was budgeted across the county for merit systems and awards. These are the budgets that departments use for employee Christmas luncheons, parties, employee award type things. And so I did print out for your reference the document that shows every elected official in their department, how much they have budgeted, and on the far right, the ones that increased or decreased from prior year. Does the board want to go through this, and did you want to make any adjustments to these, consider any cuts here?
Well, I think that if we're going to look at any kind of a pay adjustment, we probably ought to make this the least important as an offset. Thoughts on that?
I think it's beneficial to retention. So if you want to cut the 88,000, then cut it. But I
Well-
think it has to do with,
I don't think it's a matter of wanting to cut it. I think it's a matter of, you know, which way does the board want to go? If they want to address, you know, the matrix and any kind of an adjustment to it, or do they want to, you know, have select departments get this money? And I would argue that it's really the entire county we should be thinking about on some of this stuff as opposed to any individual departments.
so Brandy, the BOCC admin, I don't think that's not for our staff. Is that for?
It is, I actually just talked to
Oh.
Leanna about that today.
Okay, that's
So
for
that is
like
specifically-
service awards, birthdays,
That
stuff
is
like that.
specifically for either your admin department or your BOCC department heads.
Okay.
So that is only BOCC staff. You do have a budget in general fund, and that is the one where that's the county-wide type of stuff, like
Gotcha.
service awards. But the
Okay.
one in admin, that really is your budget.
Okay.
And part of the increase there is that I reallocated, there were some things budgeted in general fund that were for specific BOCC employees, so I just moved them. So that's part of why you're seeing an increase there.
Okay.
So if there's any board direction on this, I would like to know. If not, I'll go ahead and move on.
Commissioner Eberline?
I would like to keep things as low as possible.
Yeah, that's the one right there.
Yep.
So, let's just put it on a low priority list right now.
All right, I'll move on. Okay, now I'm going to go to the non-capital summary. Okay. And this is, so these are requests from departments for, it's supposed to be non-recurring purchases or purchases that only happen every few years. The easiest example is items like radios. I'm gonna zoom out, so it might be hard to see on the screen, but the commissioners have the printed copy in front of them, and I need to be able to navigate it on my computer as I'm going through my presentation, so. We're gonna go down the list on the, I'm gonna go through the column that has the red and, green highlights. That's if it increased or decreased over last year, but I am gonna go through every line individually. And I'm just gonna go through, and if you wanna stop me, then just go ahead and interrupt. If there are certain ones in here that you feel we could use fund balance for, we can do so. Departments may not have the same non-capital purchases every year, but as a county, we definitely have, these are operational expenses. They occur every year, even if we're not, making the exact same purchase every time. But, line 1 through 5 are solid waste requests, so that's things like trash pump, chainsaw, welder, maintenance equipment, Kubota rack attachment, pull behind magnet, a jack, drill press, plasma cutter, video surveillance. So that's lines 1 through 5 is solid waste. Starting on line 6, this is a request from the district court clerks for a rapid print timestamp machine. Is this something we could use district court fund balance for? This is number 6. This is the court clerks. They want to buy a rapid
Yeah,
print time.
we have plenty of
So
fund
we could
balance.
use district court fund balance for
Restricted
that.
Fund 45.
Yeah, what's the lifespan of something like that?
I would have to ask the district court.
But many
director.
years typically.
I
Don't know, but I can get that.
No, they're not here.
I can get that number for you guys.
I think if something lasts, multiple years,
multiple
then
years.
it should be a capital expense.
Okay, so I'm gonna mark that as fund balance. Number 7 is a request from the sheriff, the vessel fund, 3 portable radios, $26,000, 4 watch guard body worn cameras at $6,300. And then that is funded with vessel funds. Jumping, line 8 and 9, okay, line 8 is a request from the vessel department with the BOCC for a riding lawnmower, $600. And then line 8, it's the same lawnmower, $1,790. They have it split between 2 budgets.
3, do they have a little bit in?
Yes, down below, line 10, they also have part of the mower in the Parks Fund. An enclosed trailer for $36.99, a riding mower for $56.09, and a welding table for $58.49. Line 11 is a request from Noxious Weeds, a flatbed water tank system for $2,200. Line 12, a request from the airport for 4 Toughbook computers, $10,000. Line 13, request from the prosecutor. They actually cut that request, so that is no longer in there. Line 14, from the sheriff's jail, $34,000 for an AED machine, 15 body-worn cameras, cam cart, 3 computer towers, 2 heater proofers, a humane restraint, portable cardiac monitor, SCBA mobile cart, 3 Scram ankle monitors, 2 Tran air escape respirators. Line 15 is from Sheriff's Maintenance, $32,000 for 2 de-icer tanks, a mower, a powder coat oven, and a snow plow.
So are we supposed to be telling you what to put in fund balance?
If, as I'm going through, if there are items you want to pay for with fund balance or items you want to cut, please tell me.
I mean, I'm good with this stuff and again, using our interest income for that.
Currently, this would be included in the interest income.
Yeah, so,
So this does not affect our bottom line then, because it's already being paid for.
Well, interest income in the budget is not being offset with property, with fund balance, right? So
Sure.
if you use fund balance for something, you're just shifting this ongoing cost to fund balance, and the interest is then covering the other ongoing costs. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but these expenditures should, I mean, we're pushing them off into the future, right? So,
So if you want to use interest for them, we would leave them as is and we would not use fund balance.
So the 3.5 million we have in one-time interest costs is what she's using to fund these things.
what, you already switched that? Because I thought it was 3.0. You're using the 3, is this, because it's non-capital, you have it in a,
It's in a B budget. So these
Got
are
it.
really considered operational expenses.
yeah.
They may not purchase, 3 ankle monitors every year, but they're gonna purchase something every
Yeah,
year.
except if we lease them, then it would be a capital purchase.
Correct. It would be an ongoing capital purchase.
Yes.
So I guess my question for the sheriff's department, I haven't seen you guys purchase Graham ankle monitors before. Is that a new thing?
Yes, ma'am. We're trying to purchase them to have them on hand for when we have inmates that end up in the hospital, that we can work with the prosecutor and the courts to either furlough or OR to the scram bracelet so we don't have to sit on them.
Okay. Is that something that I wonder if AMP has extra? Because I know that so, I don't know. I guess it's a question we can,
You could ask the AMP director.
she'll have to ask somebody else. so.
Okay, line 15, request from, I think I already did that. Line 16, sheriff search and rescue, $1,200 for a classroom reception desk. Line 17, request from sheriff SWAT, 3 gas masks for $2,400. Line 18, a request from sheriff's driver's licensing for a printer, copier scanner. Line 19, from the sheriff's office, detectives, 2 cubicles for $5,300. Line 20, sheriff patrol, $15,000 for 3 Archon mats, 10 Glock blank firing training pistols, 2 adaptive training suits. Line 21, request from Sheriff Animal Control, a metal collapsible crate for $1,500. Line 22, Sheriff Civil Department, $1,700 for a computer, keyboard, and mouse. An office phone. The sheriff's office cut their request for the vehicle wrap and rims. Line 23, a request from Sheriff's Department, the elected official admin budget, a commercial freezer for evidence, $2,000, and they cut the request for fencing, which was $8,200. Line 24, request from AMP for radios and batteries, $74,000. Line 25, request from AMP K9 for a new K9, $9,900. That is being offset with $5,000 of donation revenue. Line 26, the sheriff's enhanced 911, $47,000 for CAD PCs, tablets, keyboards, rugged laptops, and 4 dispatch chairs. Line 27 is regular 911. 20 radios for $119,000, 10 for the jail, 10 radios for detectives, 1 tri-band radio for jail DRT, 3 radios for patrol, and 4 dispatch chairs, and then miscellaneous chargers and batteries, antennas. So total for that is $234,000. Line 28, from the assessor, the DMV in Post Falls, $4,000 request for to build up their front counter wall, new door knob and keys, and then line 29 is from the DMV, Coeur d'Alene DMV. Same thing, $8,000 to build up the front counter wall, and then a new door and keys. Line 30 is treasurer, $3,000 for 2 chairs and 1 security camera. Line 31 is also treasurer. This is 3 licenses for crystal reports and AQ2 transaction automation. Line 32 is clerk, which is elections. This is supply carts and shelving for the new HART system with elections. And the clerk did say this is a non-recurring item, and so this would be one we could use fund balance for if the board's okay with that.
But if we have the interest income, it's the same thing as fund balance.
So, yeah. So we'll just leave it as is then.
Yeah.
And then line 33 is an IT budget. That's a request for a SQL workstation license and a SQL server license. That's $20,000. Line 34 is another IT budget, $16,000, which is admin campus, camera replacements, and then parts and supplies for that. Line 35 is still IT, annual PC replacements, $76,000. Line 36, again, IT, $40,000, which would be copier replacements and printer replacements. Line 37 is the IT for the sheriff. Annual PC replacements is $64,000. Line 38 is again IT for the sheriff, $26,000 for copier replacements, data center parts and maintenance, printer replacements, records redaction. Line 39 is a request from community development for $8,000, which is 3 drones for inspections and code enforcement. Line 40 is a request from community development for updates and modifications to their IMS software. Line 41 is building and grounds, $14,000 for conference tables, a flatbed hoist, airbags. And that takes us through the non-capital summary. I like to just kind of put that into the record so the electeds and citizens know what's included in there. Is there any thoughts or direction? If not, I'll move on.
Just one second. Grant, did you want to?
Yeah, Commissioners, I noticed there was a line item in there for the driver's license department for a copier scanner. That would be redundant with the line item for IT in there for copiers and scanners. So I'd suggest that that could be removed because IT will be taking care of that copier need out of our own budget, so.
I don't know, I don't know if that was DMV or if it was a sheriff's department.
It was sheriff's driver's license.
Oh,
Sorry,
thank you.
it was
Thank you.
Any other redundancy? Maybe, please.
I don't want to rabbit trail you too far. I am here for another issue today, but several of those line items that Brandy mentioned at the bottom there, we're going to take and sharpen a pencil pretty tight on for you. They've given us a trend analysis. We have been able to see that we've been putting money back to the budget every year, knowing this is a super tight year. We actually have an ask that we have to bring to you unfortunately later, but to make it quick and short, we're going to, I'll make it my commitment, whatever that ask is later, we're going to reduce it by farther so that it is still a net savings for you.
Can you just go ahead and explain your
Sure.
increase?
So Office, the big Office 365 thing, big fight with the European Union. They had a price increase, and so even our projected costs was not enough this year. We put in the budget for, we're actually okay for 25, but for 26, the cost for Office is going to be $264 or $265,000. We put in $237, so we need to increase that by about $28,000. But knowing that and sitting here hearing what you guys are going through, we are going to go back through each of these operational costs and find a way to make more than a $28,000 savings. So there's really nothing we can do about Microsoft increasing their price. It's a product we use, and unfortunately we're kind of at their mercy right now, but we will find a way to make that to where we're not increasing these numbers even more for you.
This part of the problem is you are increasing ongoing costs and decreasing one-time costs.
That's exactly it. We're at an all-time low. We're normally about $500,000 a year in capital requests, and with the world going to what it is, which is where we don't buy like the office suite
Yeah.
one time and then sit on it, now we're having to pay a reoccurring cost every year. Everything's going to reoccurring costs now. But all that to say that, yeah, we understand the plight you're in, and we'll do everything we can there to try to help out.
Thank you.
Is the board okay with me increasing the IT budget for that increase to Microsoft 365. I just want to make sure you're okay with that.
We have to do it.
And then I do appreciate Grant's willingness to make some budget cuts. He's one of the few that I've reached out to and has been willing to do that. So if there are no further questions or direction on the non-capital summary, I'm going to move on to the big one, which is the OpEx summary. And this is too much to go through every single line. This is literally every single B budget in the entire county. So every single line is the sum of one budget. And I'm only going to go through the ones that are in red that have increased, which is the ones that have increased greater than $10,000. Before we start going into the line-by-line detail, there are a few specific things that I wanted to ask the board if they were okay using fund balance for, that are one-time costs. So line 107 is the auditor's B budget. And you can see, let me get all the way there. Okay, we are increasing $76,000. That is because we have budgeted $110,000 for a software consultant to begin the new process selecting a new ERP. And so that is non-recurring for my department. So if the board is okay, we can use fund balance for that to reduce.
Or
the budget.
interest, I mean, yeah, interest.
We'll use fund balance because this is really something that's not going to be happening again and again. So it'll help, it'll reduce on the ongoing cost.
I'm fine.
Okay. And then line 102 is the treasurer's budget. They've budgeted $50,000 for XTR. That's another item that I was wondering if the budget would, if the board would want to use fund balance for that consultant.
Sure.
Okay. And then line 119 is community development. They have budgeted $300,000 for a comp plan consultant. Again, I think that would be a good fit for fund balance if the board's okay with that.
It's okay with me.
Yep.
And then, okay, we already cut the Rathdrum Jail, which was my other item to bring up. Okay. So I'm just going to go through these, and if you have questions for the electeds that are here on their budgets or whatever, go ahead and stop me or something you want to discuss. So line 2, this is a solid waste budget increased primarily due to fuel and maintenance supplies are the biggest items. Line 4 is another solid waste budget. Line 5 is solid waste, line 7, and line 8. Or no, just line 7. Those are all solid waste budgets that increased over 10,000. Line 8 is the Aquifer Protection District budget. That increased primarily community support services, which is programs that they're involved in with other agencies. They are self-funded. They are not funded with property tax. Line 27 is the Historic Society B budget, increased by 20,000. That is primarily an increase in other professional services. However, we are budgeting to pay for that with their fund balance. So it did increase, but we do have an offset in there to use their fund balance for that. I believe it's some one-time costs related to a special program they want to do. Line 38 is the airport admin budget, increased 107,000, primarily due to the increase in their tower expenses. Line 51 is the jail detention response team budget, increased $18,000. That's primarily safety supplies, weapons and self-defense equipment, non-capital equipment, and then travel and training expenses. Line 55, the sheriff's jail B budget, increased $1.6 million. Most of that is the $1.3 million increase in the jail medical service. We also have a $52,000 increase in food services, a $40,000 increase in hospital and other healthcare professionals, and a $200,000 increase in medication, a $45,000 increase in housing supplies. So you can see just a lot of those increases related to the operations of the jail. Line 56 is the sheriff's maintenance budget, increased 98,000. 15,000 of that is non-capital requests, and then an $84,000 increase in their repair and maintenance line.
Real quick, does that have anything to do with the Kootenai North campus?
It might have some to do, but there are also additional contracts. But I think some of that might be driven by just having more square footage to maintain.
So that's one of the areas that I think it's important that the board is sensitive to the fact that this is county growth. This isn't elected official budget growth, although these expenses have to fall under the elected official. So there'll be a little bit of a transition until it becomes more normalized, I guess you could say.
Correct, and at some point, if the board decides to take over and use the sheriff's old admin campus for something else, those expenses will fall under the board instead of the sheriff. So you might see a trade-off in future years at some point, so.
Okay.
Line 71 is the sheriff's patrol budget, increased $61,000. That is mainly due to weapons and self-defense equipment, ammo and gun supplies, and non-capital equipment, as well as vehicle maintenance, subscription-based software, and safety supplies. Line 78 is the adult misdemeanor probation canine budget, increased $12,000. Almost all of that is due to the purchase of a new canine, then the travel costs to go and pick up the canine, but the training is gonna be done locally here by Mark Severance. Line 79 is the AMP regular B budget, increased $69,000, and that is due to the 5-year contract for the new tasers. Line 86 is,
I'm sorry, Brandy, back to line 79, it says radio purchase.
yes,
So did we not do that on non-capital?
we did. So this summary includes non-capital. So the non-capital was a drill down specifically into just those items. And this is the bird's eye view of everyone's B budget
Okay.
total. And so you can see that AMP's B budget increased because of the taser contract that we covered, so.
Yep.
Line 86 is the board's budget for ICRIMP, our liability insurance, and that is increasing $74,000, which I believe is a 6.4% increase. Line 88 is the building and grounds 5-year plan budget. That's increasing $117,000. Those are repairs they are doing throughout the county that don't qualify as capital, and so they are in the B budget. Line 107 is the audit budget, which is increasing $76,000, and that is all due to the $110,000 for the software consultant, which we've already agreed to use fund balance for. Line 112 is an IT budget, increasing $47,000, primarily due to subscription-based softwares for multi-factor identification and consultants regarding that as well, and then some computer hardware maintenance and parts and supplies. Line 115 is another IT budget, increasing $29,000 due to computer software maintenance. Line 119 is community development's budget, increasing $247,000. However, we are going to use $300,000 to pay for that consultant that's in there. And then line 123 is the BOCC's general fund budget in Fund 10, which is increasing by $50,000, primarily due to increase in our independent auditor contract and increases in utilities for the new building. And we will cut from there the Rathdrum jail amount, which is in there right now. So
Okay.
that was the OpEx summary. Let me check my list. So I believe I've gone through all of the individual items I wanted to touch on today. Now, if the board wants to stay, we can circle back to the outstanding items in personnel and capital. You want to circle back to those?
Thoughts?
I don't know, do we have direction for people to prioritize or
Well, I
cut
think things need to be
ongoing?
prioritized. As much as we can put into the interest income category as far as where we pay for some of these items that, or fund balance, depending on, the frequency of them. As long as we can do that and then just kind of get a prioritization from the elected officials, I think at that point, we can start making much more, precise decisions on what to keep and what not.
Two things. One, I know there were some personnel items for the assessor that I think that they're willing to speak to if the board wants to hear that. And then also, I may have missed it. Is the board wanting to reduce the amount of interest used for ongoing costs from 3.5 to a lower number?
Thoughts on that?
I gave my thoughts.
So you want to move it to 2 million?
That's just the most conservative thing to do. Am I still comfortable with 2.5 or 3? Probably. It's just we have returned an enormous amount of money back to the general fund balance for the last 3 years, like double-digit return in millions. So it just is concerning.
Well, there's a little bit of flexibility, but people just have to understand that if that interest income disappears, your steps disappear. Your COLA disappears, depending on the needs. And if it's not there, it's not there. So that just has to be something that people need to understand, that if we use money that is not certain in the future because one elected official is doing a really good job on managing it, and that changes in the future, then there are consequences with that. And as long as that's well understood, and it doesn't come back to the board asking us, what is that going to mean for the future and retention and all those things, it's a capacity issue. It is what it is in that
It's called
sense.
the crapshoot.
Yeah. So, but I agree with you. We probably should follow the treasurer's advice, at least moving it downward where that number is. We probably will just, we can either start at 2 and nibble away at it, coming back up, depending on the need.
Okay, so you want to reduce the ongoing costs down to 2 million?
But knowing that we have, easily up to $1 million cushion, depending on, what that expense is,
Okay.
how frequently it is.
Okay. And then do you want me to add into the preliminary summary the cost of any COLA so that you can see it in relation to the bottom line or not? Not at this time.
Well, where it would be helpful, and Commissioner Eberline, if you have thoughts on this, I'd certainly love to hear them, but where the elected officials are on something like this, do they want, is that their number one priority? Is it number 3, number 33? Understanding where that is, I think, tells us where we should be prioritizing the expenditures.
Safe and sound.
Yeah, what I don't like is saying this is what you're going to get, deal with it, if people have some flexibility to get what they want out of it and they're willing to give up other things.
Likely it's going to come down to the new personnel request that you're looking at
yeah,
for elected officials to decide, well,
I'll have to stay.
yeah, if we need it or not to try to go for that some percentage of a COLA. We do the steps, and those are worked in already into the preliminary summary. Those average, I think, is it 2 to 5% on anniversary dates.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess it's really just going back to the elected officials and saying what's the priority to not only the individual elected official, but as a group too, I would say.
Let me just let the board know. Is it number 1 or is it 21?
So in general, as people are thinking of cuts to make to their budgets, we need to cut A and B budget because those are our ongoing costs. So we did fund a little bit of our B budget with fund balance because some of those were non-recurring, like the consultants. But in general, people need to be looking at their A budget requests, especially the new FTEs. So everyone up here in this section that has requested a new employee, those are the most expensive personnel requests. So those are the ones that if elected officials don't come back with any cuts, as the board, we're gonna have to go back to this. And you're gonna have to make some cuts to balance the budget. And then down here, changes to ongoing positions. Even if you're an elected official who has made cuts that are saving money already, there are still opportunities to help with the budget deficit even further. You can only enhance savings, the more you cut. And so some of the outstanding ones from last week were the prosecutor's requests as well as the assessors. Did you want to circle back to those at this moment or wait until the next meeting?
Thoughts on that?
I have a meeting in 15 minutes, but whatever you want to do, doesn't matter. We're so far away right now that
You want to circle back on this?
We could.
Okay. We'll circle back on it.
Next time?
Yeah, and let's set out a larger block of time if we can.
So I'll make the next, so just for everyone's reference, I have so many documents open right now. We have 3 budget meetings left. So I'll go through and work with the board staff to make the next 2 hours, because right now they're only scheduled for an hour. And so I am hoping that every elected will get to me with any cuts they can make, because,
Well, prioritize it, and then what you do is you have a running total on the side, so that, the first item, if it's $100, it's 100. If the next item is another 100, you have 200 on that column, and you can see as you're adding up the dollars for these requests, and we can figure out where that mark is, if you will, of where the cut will be on the prioritized items, depending on, what we're looking at for percent increase from 0 to 3. Looking at how much we want to allocate for interest income on these things. And
COLA.
what's that?
COLA.
Well, that would be as part of the line item priority. And the only other thing I would ask is that if you have vacant positions and you want them, either you prioritize that over the COLA or it's under the COLA, especially if you're asking for more positions.
all right, I have nothing further.
Kim, yes.
Hi, Kim Stevenson with the airport for the record. I apologize for having to bring this to you at a meeting. There was a line item that was inadvertently left out of our original budget submission. It is a operational expense. It is not new. It's a regular cost. It's $18,692, and that goes in subscription-based software. And I'm asking if we can request the auditor's office add that to our B budget. That will still put us, we have enough revenues to cover that, non-property tax revenues to cover that dollar amount.
Is that a Sabita item or is that just a B budget?
I don't know. I'll have to
Okay.
look at it, but it will be, the airport fund is not tax supported, so it won't affect your bottom line.
Yep,
As long as it's paid for with your revenues.
yes.
So, okay.
Yep, thank you. Go ahead and add it.
Would anyone like to speak at this point related to the budget within the county government? Okay, we will move to, I believe that's everything, right? Unless there's any other comments or questions, let's move to public comment. Hearing nothing, 11:15, meeting adjourned. Thank you.